Welcome to BookPilot, your destination for powerful ideas from the world's most impactful books. Today, we are exploring a truly mind-bending concept from Rory Sutherland's fascinating book, Alchemy. Sutherland introduces us to this incredible idea of intervention. Basically, it's the realization that instead of spending millions or even billions trying to change physical reality, we can create massive value just by altering human perception. It turns out psychological solutions are often radically cheaper and, honestly, wildly more effective than strictly logical ones.
To really get what we mean by altering perception, just think about the screen you're looking at right now. You probably assume it's producing millions of distinct colors, right? Well, actually, it's not. It's only producing three: red, green, and blue. Your screen is literally designed to hack your brain. By mixing just those three primary colors, completely new colors are created entirely inside your head. Now, a dog, on the other hand, can only detect two colors, so to them, your incredibly expensive TV looks absolutely awful. The fundamental takeaway here is that just like screens create new colors in the human brain, we can create massive value by altering perception instead of tweaking physical reality.
And that brings us to our first major paradigm shift of the book. Section 1, Perception is Reality, Hacking the Human Experience. Okay, let's look at a pretty staggering number. $8 billion. Back in 2009, the train company Eurostar was hemorrhaging customers to airlines. So they asked a perfectly logical question: how do we make the journey from London to Paris better? And what did the logical engineers do? They went out and spent over $8 billion building entirely new train tracks just to shave 40 measly minutes off the trip. So for $8 billion, Eurostar solved for the quantity of time. But what if they had solved for the quality of time instead? A psychological solution might have been taking just $1 billion to hire the world's most gorgeous male and female supermodels to walk up and down the aisles handing out free champagne for the whole journey. I mean, it sounds completely ridiculous, doesn't it? But it's a fraction of the cost, and instead of complaining about the trip being too long, passengers would probably be begging the driver to slow the train down.
This exact same psychological principle applies to the apps we use every single day. Think about Uber. They didn't necessarily reduce the raw time it takes for a car to get to you compared to a traditional taxi. What they did, which was brilliant, was reduce the uncertainty of your wait. Just showing a tiny digital car moving on a map magically makes the wait feel shorter and, infinitely less anxiety-inducing. We are so much happier waiting 10 minutes while watching a progress map than waiting 5 minutes in a state of total blind uncertainty. Psychological design beats raw speed every time.
Let me tell you another amazing story that shows how this plays out in consumer behavior. In the UK, if you buy a Ferrari, they'll deliver your brand new car to your local dealership completely for free. Or you can go with option 2, the factory tour. You pay £500, travel all the way to Italy at your own expense, and drive the car off the factory lot yourself. Physical reality hasn't changed at all. You are literally just picking up your car. But by changing the context and calling it a tour, Ferrari successfully gets customers to enthusiastically pay £500 to do the company's delivery work for them. It's genius. So the crucial point here is that perception often completely overrides reality. Take the English Royal Mail. They were successfully delivering an incredibly impressive 97% of first-class mail overnight, but they almost broke their entire infrastructure and spent fortunes trying to push that success rate to 98.5%. But here's the real kicker. If you ask the general public, people assumed the success rate was somewhere between 40 and 80%. Literally no one knew it was 97%. Their actual problem wasn't a broken service. It was terrible public perception and marketing. If perception is worse than reality, you don't fix the reality, you fix the perception. This perfectly sets up our next major concept. Section 2, Small Tweaks, Massive Impact. The Power of the Minor. We constantly fall into the trap of assuming that complex, expensive problems need complex, expensive solutions. But incredibly cheap, seemingly trivial tweaks can completely transform human behavior. Let's rattle off a couple of fun examples. Are people complaining about slow elevators? Instead of buying faster, wildly expensive motors, just put mirrors in the lobby. People get distracted looking at themselves, their boredom vanishes, and the ride immediately seems faster. Or how about trying to sell a $250,000 Rolls-Royce? At a standard car show, it looks absurdly expensive compared to a normal sedan. But Rolls-Royce started showing off that exact same car at luxury yacht and private plane shows. Suddenly, parked next to multi-million-dollar boats, a $250,000 car looks like a cheap impulse buy. These are low-cost context shifts that totally change user perception without ever touching the actual product. And this elegantly applies to the medical field, too.
Patients notoriously have this terrible habit of ditching their antibiotics the second they start feeling better. Now, you could try rational logic, maybe try scaring them with complex biology lessons about superbugs, or you could use psychological chunking. Instead of giving a patient 24 identical white pills, you give them 18 white pills and 6 blue ones. You tell them take the white ones first and only then take the blue ones. By creating a milestone, a visual finish line right in the middle of the process, the psychological likelihood that patients will actually finish the treatment totally skyrockets.
Which brings us to a massive trap that so many businesses fall into, designing for the average. Look, designing for the average person literally means designing for absolutely nobody. Think about it logically for a second. If you design pants for an average height of 1.65 meters, they might fit a few people okay, but they definitely aren't going to fit a 2-meter tall giant or a 1.3-meter short person. Broad, logical averages just create mediocre products that nobody truly loves. Think about Harry Potter. It wasn't designed for an average global citizen. It was written very specifically for 11-year-old English boys. Yet, because it was so deeply loved by that specific niche, the excitement leaked out and it became this massive phenomenon, loved by everyone everywhere.
We are moving into some truly fascinating territory now. Section 3, Embracing the Counterintuitive, Why Opposites Win.
So in science or math, there are right answers and wrong answers. The opposite of a good, correct idea is just a wrong idea. If 5 times 2 is 10, then 11 is wrong. But Sutherland points out a pretty wild concept. In the realms of psychology and marketing, the opposite of a good idea is very often another brilliant idea. Let's look at Coca-Cola. The logical, tested formula for a massively successful drink is that it tastes sweet and universally appealing, comes in a large can, and is priced relatively low. Now look at Red Bull. They did the exact opposite of what logical market research would suggest. Red Bull tastes strange and kind of medicinal, it comes in a tiny little can, and it's priced really high. If you pitched that logically, you'd be laughed out of the boardroom. Yet, Red Bull achieved phenomenal success precisely because it embraced the counterintuitive.
We see this exact same phenomenon in the hospitality industry. Logically, the formula for a successful restaurant is polite service and warm smiles, right? So what's the opposite? Waiters literally throwing food at you and hurling insults. Yet there are highly profitable novelty restaurants that make millions by intentionally treating their customers terribly. When rudeness becomes part of the expected culture, it just turns into this hilarious, unique experience. It absolutely proves that human beings will enthusiastically pay for counterintuitive experiences that completely defy pure logic.
Now, I want to ask you a question that might seem completely absurd at first glance. Why do you take a sick child to the doctor? Just think about that for a second. Logically, you'd assume it's simply for medicine, right? For treatment and physical healing. But the psychological truth is actually far more complex and interesting. The real reason very often is reassurance. You know, a simple cold or Kindergarten virus just needs rest and the body will fix itself, but you go to the pediatrician anyway because you have a profound psychological need for an expert to look you in the eye and say, hey, your child is going to be okay. We seek peace of mind, not just a prescription. And this brilliantly illustrates why asking seemingly stupid questions is so incredibly vital. They bypass our rational assumptions and uncover our true, hidden, deeply rooted human motivations.
And that leads us right into our final act, Section 4, The Death of Pure Logic. It's time we finally dismantle this stubborn myth that humans process the world objectively and make decisions based purely on rational, spreadsheet-level data. Imagine 2 hypothetical car commercials. Car ad A highlights the spacious interior, the engine horsepower, and the comfortable seats. You know, all the perfectly objective specs you should care about. Then there's car ad B, which completely ignores the specs and just shows the car racing side by side with a majestic lion on the African savanna. Why does ad B win almost every single time? Because it's actually been proven that ads featuring beautiful or fluffy animals just perform better, completely regardless of the product. When we buy a car, our unconscious minds are making decisions based on subjective feelings, associations, and emotions, far more than the objective vehicle specifications.
The great Henry Ford summed this up perfectly. He famously said, if I asked people what they want, they would say a faster horse. What people logically say they want almost never actually aligns with their deeply rooted psychological needs or the unconscious drivers of their behavior. We all just assume people see clearly and think logically, but it's really not true. We don't see the world as it objectively is. We see it according to what it subjectively means to us.
Furthermore, it actually doesn't pay to be strictly logical, especially if everyone else around you is doing exactly that. In military strategy, if an army follows perfect, step-by-step logic, their enemy is going to quickly figure out their goal and know their every single move. Perfect logic makes you completely predictable. And the exact same goes for business. If you just copy the logical best practices of your competitors, you just blend in and become obsolete. Instead, Sutherland advises us to find their blind spots. Go read the 1- and 2-star reviews of your competitors' products. Find what defies the conventional logic of the industry, and exploit that vulnerability to truly stand out.
And this beautifully synthesizes the core thesis of our entire journey today. The remaining problems of the modern world are largely logic-proof. Think about it. We don't live in the Middle Ages anymore. If a persistent problem could have been solved by pure rational logic, we would have already figured it out and fixed it centuries ago. The problems that are left over are the messy, human, psychological ones. The future belongs to those who understand perception, emotion, and this brilliant psychological alchemy.
If you enjoyed this audiobook summary and want to discover more powerful ideas from great books, subscribe to BookPilot and stay tuned for more.